To understand 1929, it is impossible without first understanding the America of the 1920s. World War I had ended, and America stood on the winning side. While Europe lay in ruins, American factories were operating at full capacity, experiencing a production boom unlike anything in world history. Radios, automobiles, refrigerators, technologies that were once only dreams had transformed into items that even an ordinary worker could buy. And the magic word was this: installment. Until that day, people only spent as much money as they had in their pockets. However, in the 1920s, the financial system invented the culture of buy now, pay later. This wasn't just valid for consumer goods. This mentality leaped over to Wall Street as well. People saw themselves as invincible, and the economy in an endless upward trend. Famous economists of the era encouraged the public even further, claiming, stock prices have reached what looks like a permanently high plateau. The reason this era was called the Roaring Twenties wasn't just the noise of jazz music, it was the roar of money and greed. From the shoeshine boy on the street, to housewives, from taxi drivers to factory workers, everyone was talking about the stock market. The stock market, once the playground of giants like Rockefeller or J.P. Morgan, had now descended to the public. But there was one thing the public didn't know. They were not guests invited to this game. They were the prey being fed at the table. Because the market was constantly rising, no one spoke of risk. When you bought a stock, you were investing money in the paper of a company whose business you didn't even know, simply with the logic that it went up yesterday, it will go up tomorrow. This was a collective hallucination.
The real engine behind this inflated market was the system of buying on margin. This system enabled the inflation of the biggest bubble financial history had ever seen. The mechanism was simple but deadly. To buy a stock, you didn't need to have all the money. Putting down just 10% was enough. The remaining 90% was lent to you by your stockbroker. Think of it this way. You have $100 in your pocket. Normally, you could buy $100 worth of stock. If the stock goes up 10%, you earn $10. But with the margin system, you could use that $100 as collateral and buy $1,000 worth of stock. When the stock went up 10%, your profit became $100, meaning you doubled your money in a single day. This math mesmerized people. Everyone was trying to get rich by borrowing. Banks were lending credit not to the companies themselves, but to the speculators buying those companies' shares. However, this system had a dark side. While leverage made you rich on the way up, it destroyed you on the way down. If the stock you bought dropped by just 10%, your entire principal investment would evaporate. Even worse, your broker would call you and say, your margin is gone. Either bring cash immediately or I'm selling your shares. This is what we call a margin call. When the market wobbled just a little, thousands of people would receive this phone call at the same time and be forced to sell what they had to cover their debts. As everyone sold, prices would drop further, and as prices dropped, more people would get a margin call. This was an unstoppable chain reaction. This was exactly the ticking time bomb set in 1929. In the summer of 1929, the market was breaking record after record, but the smart money, that is, the big bankers and insiders, had already started to slowly abandon the ship. Industrial production had actually begun to decline, steel orders were shrinking, and the construction sector had stalled. In other words, the real economy was on its deathbed, but the stock market, the financial economy, was running a marathon. This disconnect was unsustainable. In September, an event called the Babson Break occurred. Economist Roger Babson stated at a conference, "Sooner or later a crash is coming, and it may be terrific." Markets reacted harshly to this, but then recovered. Investors ignored this warning, seeing it as the ramblings of an old man. Human psychology is like this. When the party is this good, no one wants to believe the lights will be turned off. By mid-October, the atmosphere began to change. Selling waves were coming more frequently and harder. With every dip, those saying, "This is a buying opportunity," entered the market, but prices fell again. The fragile glass known as confidence had begun to crack. On Wednesday, October 23rd, a massive selling pressure formed at the market close. That evening, phones in New York brokerage offices did not stop ringing. Brokers were giving their clients that dreaded news: if you don't find money by tomorrow, we have to liquidate you. On the morning of Thursday, October 24th, 1929, Wall Street woke up to one of the most chaotic days in its history. From the moment the opening bell rang, orders rained down, but these were sell orders. Prices went into freefall. The technology of the day, the ticker tape machines that printed prices, could not keep up with the speed of transactions. The tapes were running 1 to 2 hours behind real time. This doubled the panic. People thought they were selling their shares, but in reality, there were no buyers at that price. Perhaps their shares had already gone to zero. By noon, a crowd of thousands had gathered in front of the stock exchange building. People waited in terror for news from inside. Rumors of suicide spread from ear to ear. Just at that moment, the guardians of the system stepped in. At the J.P. Morgan building, the most powerful bankers of the era held an emergency meeting. They created a pool to save the market. Richard Whitney, who was assigned the task, walked onto the exchange floor with confident steps. In front of everyone, he began buying U.S. Steel shares by placing a bid well above the market price. The message was clear: we are here. We will not allow the fall. This move worked. The panic stopped, and prices recovered slightly. As people went home that evening, they thought, the bankers saved us. The worst is behind us. But this was merely a band-aid. Over the weekend, fear spread across the entire country like a virus. Another sharp drop occurred on Monday, but the real blow came on Tuesday, October 29th. Black Tuesday. No banker's power was enough to stop this flood anymore. The floodgates had completely burst. On that day, panic ceased to be a rational fear and turned into mass hysteria. From the Vanderbilt family to the security guard at the door, everyone was trying to sell. But to whom? In a place where everyone is a seller, there were no buyers. Shares lost 50%, 60% of their value within hours. Some stocks couldn't find buyers even at $1. By the end of that day, billions of dollars in wealth had evaporated into thin air. Western Union telegraphs were not working because the lines were jammed. Investors could only learn hours later that they had lost everything. Legend has it that stockbrokers jumped out of windows. This is a bit of an exaggerated urban legend. In reality, suicides increased later, but the psychological collapse was certain. The illusion of wealth had ended, leaving behind only massive debts. The stock market crash could have remained just a problem for the rich if the banking system had been sound, but it wasn't. Banks had taken customers' deposits and used them to speculate in the stock market. When the market crashed, the bank's assets melted away too. Hearing this, the public rushed to the banks. Bank run. When everyone wants to withdraw their money at the same time, no bank can cover it. Banks locked their doors. People watched as their life savings vanished behind iron bars. Between 1929 and 1933, nearly half of the banks in America failed. The money supply shrank by 30%. This hit the real economy hard. People with no money couldn't spend. With no spending, factories couldn't sell their goods. Factories that couldn't sell fired workers. Workers who were fired couldn't spend anything at all. This terrible cycle caused unemployment to skyrocket to 25%. America's pride, the automobile factories, fell silent. Crops in the fields were left to rot because prices were too low to make them worth harvesting. In the cities, queues stretching for miles formed in front of soup kitchens. Men who once went to their offices in suits were now trying to survive by selling apples on street corners. In places like New York's Central Park, shanty towns made of tin and cardboard, built by the homeless, were established. They named these nests of misery Hoovervilles to blame the president of the era, Herbert Hoover. The Great Depression of 1929 was not just an economic crisis. It was the trauma of a generation. It shook people's trust in money, banks, and the state to its core. Existing from this crisis was only possible with the massive industrial production brought about by World War II. So, what have we learned today? Financial markets have no memory. Every new generation repeats the same mistakes, saying, this time is different. In 1929, it was radio stocks. In 2000, it was internet stocks. In 2008, it was real estate bubbles. The instruments change, but human nature, that cycle of greed and fear, never changes. 1929 reminds us of this. If an economy is built merely on speculation and debt, rather than real production and value creation, no matter how high that tower rises, it is doomed to collapse. And when the music stops, it is revealed who on the dance floor is naked. If what I've shared today helped you see the world from a different perspective, don't forget to subscribe. Because history always has an answer, you just need to look from the right angle. And I'm here to help you find those answers buried in the dusty pages of financial history.